Hello student, this video lecture is prepared for the particular technology subject and I will discuss the unit number 4, that is known as the sedimentation. So in this unit we will discuss the concept and principle of sedimentation, types of settling, then concept of terminal falling velocity. Then we will discuss the difference between sedimentation and filtration, difference between sedimentation and centrifugation or fugation, difference between sedimentation and classification. Then we will discuss the laboratory batch sedimentation test and settling velocity curve, and the equipment that is used for the sedimentation is the thickener. So that thickener also we will discuss. Then there are different types of thickeners and coagulants and role of coagulants in the filtration and sedimentation. We will discuss at the end of this unit. So let us start the subject unit. So what is meant by sedimentation? So the separation of solid from suspension in a liquid by gravity settling is called a sedimentation. That means you have to separate the solid material which is suspended in the liquid. And how this separation is taking place? By using a gravity settling. So what is meant by gravity settling? Just we have to use the gravitational force for settling of this solid material. Then whole process is called the sedimentation. In this operation, dilute slurry is separated in a clear liquid and a slurry of higher content solid. So the thickener means door thickener is the one of the common equipment is used for the sedimentation. So what is happening? That means dilute slurry. Dilute slurry means the slurry is diluted or solids are diluted in that liquid. That is called a dilute slurry. So you have to apply that slurry gravitational settling and then we obtain a product as a clear liquid and higher content of solid. So if we look at this figure, it will give the idea about the sedimentation. So here if we look at this figure, this is called a dilute slurry and these dots, or you can say the dots, is nothing but the solid material and all these things is called a suspension. Okay, and these solids are insoluble impurities. Okay, so that we have to separate by using gravity settling. That means you have to keep this solid as it is for a given time and then we will obtain the clear liquid or clear water. So this blue portion shows clear liquid or clear water, and then at this bottom of this vessel we obtain the insoluble impurity, which is also called a concentrated solid. Okay, so in this way we can carry out the sedimentation process. And where this sedimentation process is used? Removal of solid liquid sewage waste. Sewage waste means wastewater treatment. Wastewater means the water which is obtained from a chemical industry is generally called a wastewater. So you have to treat that water and then it is sent to the river. So it is called a solid liquid sewage waste. Then removal of suspended impurities from water to be used for domestic and industrial purpose. That means in the river we are having the water with the suspended impurities, that may be mud or some solid particles. So that we have to separate for drinking purpose. Domestic means for drinking purpose, and then for industrial purpose also. So industry is also required the clear liquid or liquid which is free from the suspended solids. So that solids may be separated and that liquid can be used in a domestic or industrial purpose. So what is happening in here? The water is allowed to stand quiescent or move very slowly within a basin. That means we have to just put the water in a tank or basin. Basin is nothing but a tank, just as it is. So while doing this, the suspended impurities are settled at the bottom of the basin, and that clear liquid is drawn up from the top. So as here shown in this figure, so clear liquid is going in upward direction, suspended impurities settle down, and how the degree of removal of suspended impurity, that means how that suspended impurities will remove. So they will depend upon the length of the retention time. That means how many times you have kept that liquid as it is. So that is called a retention time. Then size of a suspended impurities. Size means how many this what liquid and solids are dissolved. Concentration of that suspension. And third point is the temperature of the water. So what is the temperature of water? And depending upon these three parameters, you can remove the suspended impurities. So these are the actual photos of some sedimentation basins or thickeners. For understanding purpose, you can see. So these are like a rectangular basins. This is a circular basins. So we will discuss this in detail in next slides. So before going to detail into the sedimentation, the settling process we have to study. So what is meant by settling? Is just the particle is settled in the liquid medium. So there are two types of a settling. First one is the free settling and another one is called a hindered settling. So what is meant by free settling? It is the settling of the particles unaffected by the other particles and the wall of the container. Okay, that means when that solid particles is settled in that tank, it will be unaffected by the other particles and wall of the containers. If we look at this figure, suppose if we take the one solid particles and if these particles are settled unaffected at the bottom of this tank or basin, it is called a free settling. That means this particle does not collide with other particles or wall of the container, means this is called a wall. So when this settling is happen, that is called a free settling. And when this free settling is happen, generally the concentration of the particulate solid in a suspension is very low. That means this suspension. Suppose this suspension is very low. That means solid quantity in this liquid is very low. At that time, the free settling is occur. And next is one is the hindered settling. So what is meant by hindered settling? It is the settling of the particles affected by the other particles and the wall of the container. So hindered settling is nothing but it is the settling of the particles affected by the other particles and the wall of the container. That settling is called hindered settling. So if we look at this figure, so these black dots are nothing but the other particles. So when this particle is settled, it may be collide with these particles, this, or sometimes it may be collide with this wall of the container or basin. So this type of a settling is called a hindered settling. And hindered settling, when it is obtained, the concentration of solid in a suspension is very large. That means this concentration, if we look at this figure, the concentration of solid is very large. So here maybe there are chances of the settling of hindered type. So hindered settling is occur. So in settling, depending upon what is the concentration, the settling is taking place. We cannot say this is the pre-settling or hindered settling, but depending upon the concentration. Concentration means, what is meant by concentration? How many solids are dissolved in that liquid. That is called a concentration of that solid. If the concentration is higher, then it is the hindered settling. If the concentration is lower, the particles are settled by pre-settling. Then we will discuss the terminal velocity or terminal falling velocity. So this part we have already discussed in a classification chapter. But again I will discuss, if the particle is allowed to settle a fluid under the influence of gravity, it will increase in velocity until the accelerating force, that means force of gravity, is exactly balanced by the resisting force, that is called a drag force. When this happens, there is no further change in particle velocity and particle will settle at the definite constant velocity. This velocity is called a terminal velocity or terminal falling velocity. That means when any particles is settled, if we look at this, so solid particles are settled in a liquid. So there are two types of forces acting on these solid particles. One is drag force, another one is the gravitational force. At the start of the settling, the gravitational force is higher, the drag force is lower, and there is one time is reached when these two forces are become equal. And at that time, these particles is fall at a constant velocity. And this velocity is called terminal falling velocity, or we can say only the terminal velocity. So this concept is important in the settling. So the terminal velocity is depend upon the size, shape and the density of the particle as well as the density of the viscosity. Okay. So like settling, there are different parameters. So like for terminal velocity also there are 4 parameters. That means size of that solid particle, shape, density of that particle, and also density and viscosity of the fluid. That means this viscosity of this liquid, density. So all these parameters are affect on the terminal velocity. So here we will stop the lecture. So in this lecture we have discussed 3 points. First one is the concept of and principle of sedimentation. Then how the sedimentation is applicable in wastewater treatment, domestic and industrial purpose. Then we have discussed the settling, pre-settling, hindered settling, and at the end of lecture we have discussed the terminal falling velocity, and the remaining part we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you.